G'day and welcome to another Marriage and Mental Illness. I'm Mark. This, of course, is my lovely wife, Merey. How's it going? I hope you're having a good week. Today on Marriage and Mental Illness, my wife and I are going to discuss how to open a conversation with someone that you're concerned about. It ties into the podcast that I did earlier in the week about having that conversation with somebody that you are concerned about.
Mm.
So, first off, let's talk about some of the signs that you'd look for in a person that somebody you know, and we're going to call them somebody you care about because you obviously care about them enough to be worried about the state of their mental health. Yeah.
Well, worried about them and you know them well enough that you can actually tell a difference in them as well.
Sure.
Also,
Sure. Well, but that
Okay.
implies caring to me because if you notice, that somebody you don't care about is struggling with mental illness, you're less likely to want to be involved in a conversation. Yeah.
for sure. But you would have to know a person and know how they normally behave. What are their behaviors normally like to even perhaps pick up on a difference?
Yep.
Otherwise, you'd have to be a particular type of person that notices that sort of thing,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
me.
All right. So we've got a friend, the hypothetical now. We've got a friend. We're really concerned about them. You are, me are. Um, what steps do you now take? So, in fact, before we get to that, what are some of the signs that you'd look for potentially?
I would look for a change in how they talk, how they deal with things,
Yep.
how they're just generally coping on a day-to-day basis.
Yep.
Um, and perhaps they're less engaged than they normally are.
Yeah.
They don't want to go out as much.
Sure. Sure. You can actually hear sometimes a change in demeanor of a confident, happy person. They're just not happy.
So not happy, but also a little withdrawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they don't even know how to process perhaps what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Could be how you go.
Yeah, well, there's no wrong answers in this space. Just unfortunately, when you've got teenagers as well, it's hard to differentiate between teenage behavior and mental illness behavior because
Oh, absolutely.
most teenagers appear mentally ill to me now.
But in fairness, you may not ever know what that difference is. And I've even spoken to professionals who are more than willing to tell me that it's hard to differentiate between
Yeah.
when they're struggling and them just being a teenager.
Yeah.
So they kind of go hand in hand.
Yep. All right. So obviously, when it comes to somebody that we're concerned about, I used this example the other day. It's like if you're on a football team and somebody tears their hamstring or their ACL or something, the game stops. Everybody pauses. Everybody says, hang on, let's stop what we're doing and let's figure out what's going on here. The same as an illness at work. Somebody's in a car accident. We're going to be very accommodating to them. But when it comes to mental illness, it seems like still today that it's a taboo. One, because of stigma, but two, just because people are so concerned that they don't want to exacerbate
I don't want to say the wrong
suffering
thing. They don't want to say the wrong thing.
to make things worse.
That's true. And also you have to think the vast majority of people perhaps haven't even encountered someone with a mental health issue. They don't understand it themselves because they don't suffer.
Yeah.
And that's fair. That is actually a fair
Yeah.
comment. That's not
Yeah.
being unfair to people. I don't have a mental health issue. So I just think it's a difficult one, and not everyone also has the ability to be able to talk to someone in a way that can be received.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that is constructive.
Yeah, it can be maybe a bit harsh, or it can be a lot of things.
Yeah. Somebody told me the other day about an experience they had where their family basically did a mental health intervention where everybody was sitting in a room. They invited her to
That
come
sounds
in.
like an amazing idea for someone with mental illness.
I was just looking at this woman going, no, they didn't do this. And she just looked forlorn and just said, yeah, that's the way that they chose to deal with it. And I said, so what was the impact of that besides all the negatives? Because obviously there's a million negatives there. She said the one thing that it did is it just cemented the fact that she needed to get help.
Mm,
But she also said it would have been much better if those people had have come to her individually, select individuals came
mm.
to her, because as it was, she felt ambushed by the entire family and everybody's pointing at her and saying she's crazy, which was nobody's intent in this situation. And she was very clear about that. Her family loved her. They just had no idea how to address the fact that she was struggling.
Yes. So they were just doing it confidence in numbers approach
Yeah,
rather than
or idiocy in numbers.
well,
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's easy
a
to
lot
say
of
that from
people
our perspective, isn't it?
well, yes, but I mean, I can see what the family's perspective was.
Yeah,
As a
yeah,
carer, I can understand that.
yeah,
And it is difficult to navigate. It's difficult to know the right things to do on a daily basis.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think that they were just, this is the best that they knew that they could do
yeah, yeah.
with their limited experience and knowledge.
Well, I
So,
guess stepping outside my mental illness for a moment and the fact that I worked in the care industry for so long, um, it could appear that that would be a good way to go about it, wouldn't it? The whole family's around to support you. Um, it's just the dangers there and the risk that you have to face, which is probably the biggest thing when it comes to talking to somebody you care about with their mental illness is the risk factors. What is the potential of harm about the way that I go about addressing the fact that my friend might be struggling with
mm.
mental illness?
But then also the harm in not addressing things with them. It's kind of, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation because you can't not. And I just think you can't be dwelling on the fact that you might say something wrong, you might do this wrong, that wrong, that wrong, and another thing again. Sometimes you just got to dive in. But interestingly, for me and my personality, I would never approach a person who I was concerned about in a group situation. It'd always be on a one-on-one because that's who I am. I would never do it that way.
Well, and coming from a sufferer's perspective as well, I was just horrified when I heard this story. And she was grateful that I was horrified because she tells other people and they don't get the crux of that story for a person with mental illness for how horrific that situation would have been. As loving and caring as it seemed and was intended to be, it was still potentially a terrible, terrible situation. So I hate to go all OH&S on it, but when I talk about risk assessment, I learned this working in the disability world. When we're intervening with somebody that's got negative behaviors, what is the risks of our intervention? What are we stepping ourselves into? Are we going to be safe? Is the client going to be safe? Which person is the best person to deal with this client? Maybe it's a little girl. She doesn't deal well with other little girls. She deals better with father figures. These were all part of the risk assessment that we went through on how do we intervene on a behavior. And that's my suggestion for people that are concerned about somebody that may have a mental illness is to do what Mary does instinctually is she sits back, she doesn't speak in haste, she's patient, but persistent.
I mean, the other thing is someone may not necessarily be having mental health issues or a mental breakdown as such. They might just be having a hard time. And I think that's more what I pick up on in someone's face and demeanor and their body language is more that they just seem like they're struggling generally.
Yeah.
And I've helped quite a few friends,
Mm.
as you know,
Yeah, you have.
and in those situations, I had one particular situation where the person who was suffering, sadly, we're not friends anymore, but the person who was suffering had only just started with their issues with their mental health.
Yep. They started addressing them, or
No, they just started their
right, and
suffering had only just
begun. They just started
had
suffering
just
from their
begun,
mental illness.
and
Yep.
they came to a group setting where people were hanging out, and they were being pushed to participate,
Yay.
but they didn't want to.
Yeah.
They didn't want to participate, and the more that they were pushed, and I mean, they had some people grabbing their arms and trying to
Uh,
pull them to participate in things, the more upset this person got. Um, and I was more like an outsider watching,
yeah.
and I could just see her distress.
Yeah.
So I just intervened and went up to her, and all I said was, "Would you like to go to the bathroom and get a drink and wash your face?" And she just looked at me and said, "Yes, that's exactly what I want to do." So we didn't actually go to the bathroom. I took her outside so she could get some air,
Yeah.
and it facilitated a conversation that way.
But see, what you've done there is you've done everything correctly as far as the mental illness playbook. Because, I mean, let's face it, it's what's the worst that can happen if you tell your friend that you're worried about them? Maybe you'll be a little bit embarrassed. Maybe they'll be embarrassed. Maybe they were in a car accident on the way to the event that you're at. What's the worst thing that is going to come out of that conversation is the fact that you are concerned for them.
Mm,
So, who's going to get mad at somebody that's showing concern for them in a constructive way? But back to that situation, let me tell you what you did there. You did exactly what a mental health professional would do, because you saw a situation escalating. You saw that people were not understanding the consequences of their actions. You looked at the person that was struggling and you immediately gave them an out. And it was a constructive out. It wasn't a get the hell out of here. It was, mate, let's go to the bathroom. Let's wash your face. Let's get a drink. Let's do anything. Then you got out of the situation, and then you kind of tacked it on to the end, but you got the next really important part of it, which is to ensure that they're safe.
mm,
And that's the biggest thing that our risk assessment has got to have is, can I talk to this person in a safe way? And what's going to be the safe way to talk to them, for me, for our friendship, for the entire
mm,
circle of influence.
mm.
So I love that you did that. That's the first time I've heard that story. You have
Yeah,
to
I
tell me
haven't,
later who
I
that was
haven't, I
for,
haven't
but
thought about it for quite some time, to be honest.
but it's
Later,
absolutely brilliant.
well, later on, she thanked me and thanked me for my gentleness.
Yeah.
That was her words. She thanked me for being so gentle.
Yeah.
Um, because it doesn't always have to be a confrontation. It can, and some people can get quite angry.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a
It
confrontation.
shouldn't be a confrontation, but sometimes it can, particularly with younger people, and they might get angry. And you just need to make that decision when you back out when we're talking about younger people. But with adults, uh, to be perfectly honest, with the people who I've talked to, it's come about naturally through conversation because we've gone out somewhere. Maybe we're on a walk. We're not in the home situation, and they're feeling more comfortable to talk. And I often find that's the case. If you're wanting to talk to someone, now I do not advocate going for a drive. I'm not really big on going for a drive because I don't quite understand.
And neither of us are drive people. We don't get it.
You have to have a destination to
Yeah,
me, but anyway.
if you're not going somewhere, get out of the car.
But you can just get them out of their home, their life, and take them somewhere that they like, perhaps, or
Perhaps, yeah.
do something
Yeah.
that's completely different. Even if they don't like exercise, going for a gentle walk somewhere nice to change the perspective can make people more amenable to having a conversation
Yeah.
about things, and that's how it's usually come about. The other way that it's come about is because people who are suffering and not dealing well with things will start dropping hints.
Yeah.
Now, I'm talking about adults more than I am children, of course. and they'll start telling you about circumstances or a story. And when you're hearing that story, you actually hear that perhaps they're not quite coping
Yeah.
well with the situation.
Yep.
Or they might even tell you, I'm not coping well with life. And that's your in. And it's not for you to fix it. You just need to listen.
Well, and you've hit on another really important key in this is that friends cannot fix friends.
Well, you can't fix anyone. You can't fix your kids, your loved ones, your friends, or your co-workers. You can't fix them. There's no fixing. But what you can be is you can be a sounding board and a person who can support them, because that's what you're there for.
Yeah. A woman told a great story at a school that we go in to speak about mental illness, and she talked about how her friend realized that she had mental health issues, had talked to her about it, and suggested she go see a doctor. And she said, no, not going to do it. So the friend said, I'm going to do something to help you. Do you trust me? And she said, yes, I do trust you. So what the friend did is she called around to all the local GPs, the general practitioners, and asked the reception people, do you have somebody there that's really good with mental health issues? And she called 5 or 6 places, found a place where the woman just said, look, we've got somebody that is brilliant. They deal with this all the time. It's almost a speciality for them. So the friend told her that she's picking her up and taking her to a GP. She said, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything, but we're just going to go and we're going to hear what they have to say. And the woman just said that this was the it was like the clouds breaking and the sun shining through on a cloudy day. It was a bright light in her darkness. And while that particular scenario is not one that would work for everyone, I love the fact that the friend knew her well enough to know that all she needed was that gentle push. Um, the friend was just a support. The friend realized that there was nothing she could do to make the situation any better, but she was able to assist, to be beside her and stand with her. Merey and I are not mental health professionals. Um, Merey basically has a PhD in caring for people with disabilities.
I do.
And I have a PTSD. I have a PTSD in having a mental health condition. And what we were saying before is especially true in this case is you need to speak about your issues. And that's what we're trying to encourage people to do is to just sorry about that. We've got some rainbows going on.
Sorry, when we're flicking between wisdom and our recording.
It can get a bit disjointed.
It can.
So for Rebecca, thank you so much for reaching out to us, mate. If you can still hear us, we love you. We hope the best for you. We want you to be well and we want you to be safe. And we really hope that you would consider going to speak to your local doctor, a family member, a parent, husband, wife, significant other, whatever. Just make sure you have a chat to somebody. What happened in that conversation as well is my mind went into risk assessment. So I had to start thinking, well, what is going to be the outcome of this discussion? Why has Rebecca reached out to us? What's her situation or their situation? Sorry about pronouns. Um, and that is what we hope you will do with a friend or a loved one that you care about, is to think about the repercussions of discussing the issue or not discussing it. I know at times I've been in the orbit of people that I've been very concerned about with their mental illness, but I've not been close enough to them to be able to confidently speak into their situation other than if they bring it up. So you spoke about how you've had friends that you've been concerned about and you've spoken to. You also have friends that have tried to, they've given you hints. Has anybody come out to you? Has somebody discussed mental illness with you because they know that we are advocates for people with mental illness? Like they're aware that I talk about mental illness quite openly. Is that another way that conversation has opened up?
I think perhaps people have opened up to me because they know that I care for people with mental health issues, and um, it's opened up conversation that way because I think a lot of people feel in a very desperate situation at times and not knowing how to navigate it and where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah.
And they're only talking to me as a friend. So they're just saying, I'm feeling this way. I don't know why, and I don't know how to make it better.
Yeah. So what do you do? Let's come back to the crux of the conversation today. So how do you open that conversation? Let's talk about hypothetical friend A, who has always been healthy as far as you know mentally, but you've started to see the signs and you've started to see they're withdrawing a little bit. They don't seem to be their happy selves. What's going to be the first thing that you think about doing once it's come onto your radar that hang on, there might be some mental health issues here? What's your first thought to do?
My first thing would be to just reach out to them. I would potentially, if I know them pretty well, I would actually just message them first
Mhm.
and just, just generally what you'd normally ask, how you doing, what you're up to, and then I would try and make a plan to meet up with them in person.
Yep.
It can be very difficult to have this type of conversation over text message. Often,
Well, it's
well,
impossible.
there's no tone, and they can't understand your tone either. Um, and then once I met up with them, it really does. If you take them out of their situation, it helps to open up conversation
Yeah.
as to where is the problem, and you can start asking. Well, for me, it's a bit different, I suppose. It's all very, very good and well, but I start asking targeted questions,
Yep.
really specific things about how long they've been feeling this way. Um, what do they think has made it worse? When did they? What was the
Oh, is there a
thing?
trigger for
Yeah,
them?
what was the start of it? Because honestly, I can guarantee you there's only one or two core issues. There's a lot of issues normally, and people feel like the walls are crashing in on them. But when you really, really think about it, it does come down to one or two core problems, really.
Well, yeah, when you're talking about somebody that's living a busy life and they've lost perspective of how much they're doing, I love that. See, this is the difference between us. I'm a deep thinker. You're very instinctual, and your instincts are invariably excellent. If you tell me that you're concerned about someone, um, 99.999 times out of 100, if not 100 times out of 100, you are able to pick that there's a situation going on, and you're able to assess
Mm.
over a long period of time whether there might be mental health issues occurring as well.
Yes, yes. I would say that's more because I'm an introvert, so I watch people
Yeah.
like a weirdo. No, I don't
She's looking at me.
I
Why is
am
she looking at me?
I am that person who will go to a busy shopping center, and if you're just sitting down, I'll just watch people because they're fascinating, and
Mm.
I will do that. Um,
There's other people at a shopping center?
yes, so many. There's so many
I
people.
only notice the ones that get in my way. So,
No, I have to put you in front of me so they stop hitting into me, but it's just rude, really, isn't it? Um, but with friends, when talking to friends, um, do you know what I generally find is the issue? And I've talked to quite a few friends now who have experienced what I probably consider and what they've been diagnosed is with depression
yep,
and anxiety.
yep.
And when we get down to the core problem, it's normally been because they're in a situation where they feel helpless. where they feel like they have no power in the circumstance that they're in.
Yep.
And that's happened multiple times for people who I've talked to.
Yeah. Now you can go a step further in this, as you've already said. You like to help people target in on what the core issue is, if there is a core issue. And that's a wonderful thing to do, but you've only been able to do that through experience and learning. Um, you're very cautious. I know that many times you will actually bounce an idea off me. I'm concerned about my friend with this. What do you think?
Yeah,
Um,
we do that. Um, or I've already had the conversation and then I talk to you about it and say, so I feel that this is the problem with my friend and this is what I said. What do you think?
yeah, yeah. Again, it comes down to that. How for me, the first and foremost thing is just it is an expression of love and of care to ask somebody if they're doing okay. But the difficulty, one of the risks that you face is how they're going to perceive your attempt at intervention.
And
Will they see it as an outpouring of love, or
mm,
will they see it as an attack? Now, there's two competing issues going on here. One, you've got the person with the potential mental illness, they're struggling with depression, anxiety, whatever. They're going to want to pull away. That's a natural first thing that a person does in that situation. Life is too much, they're going to withdraw. The other side of that is that that person can be hyper stimulated to input. So, what you consider to be a normal conversational tone can come across as being an attack.
mm,
It can come across for whatever reason, the person's perception, the tone of your voice, your body language, the way in which you go about trying to address this, it can look like an attack. And it's important for us as people that want to help people to understand that the way that we are saying things is not necessarily the way that the person's hearing it.
exactly.
You've been very, very clear with me since we've started our mental illness journey, um, with the fact that at times my perception is 100% off.
Mm, yes. Yes, it is. um, I just think when you're approaching a person, just be mindful of the fact that the first time you try and have a conversation with them, it might not be that the moment.
Sure.
You got to pick your moments. You really, really do.
Yep.
Harder if you don't know them that well.
Yeah.
Let them lead the conversation. Talk about things that they're interested in, and hopefully it can lead there. And if you start asking them little questions, little prodding questions, and you're sort of not getting anything back,
Yeah.
then just back off a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are some of the leading questions? What are some of the pinpoint? And I know this is difficult for you because you do it instinctually. You don't do it. Uh, you don't like have dot points that you're like, these are the six questions. You see each individual as an individual person, and you'll only ever speak to them in the way that you know that they're comfortable with. But what are some of the questions? I mean, in
Mm,
Australia, we've got the big "Are you okay?" day. Just
mm,
saying to people, "Are
yes.
you okay?" Problem with that I have is I think it needs to be "I'm not okay" day. I think that it should be people talking to their friends and saying, "Mate, I'm not okay. I'm not dealing well."
But
Um,
that's hard for
and
a lot of people.
it's impossible for many people. But "Are you okay?" is a wonderful question to ask, but I think it's more about what you ask after that
Mm.
that's important.
I just think if a person's approached you and just said that maybe they might indicate that they're feeling really stressed out,
Mhm.
they might not just come out and say, you know what, I'm super sad.
Yeah.
I feel sad. Sometimes I feel really angry. They might say that. But I actually think that they will guard it and hide it around other ways to say that,
Yep.
those sort of things. And they'll put it in terms of, I feel really stressed and overwhelmed. Overwhelmed is a big word.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Um, and I just don't feel like I'm coping as well as I normally do. That's another one.
Yep.
And then if I'm hearing someone saying that to me, I would then say, what's stressing you out? And they may say a bunch of things. Goodness knows when you have kids and husbands and families, it could be everything. It could be all a lot together, and they may mention those. And then I would say, okay, thinking about all the things that are stressing you out, what do you think is the main thing? If you really, really think about it, what's the core thing that makes you feel stressed the most? And they I know for most of my friends, they'll get confused, but as we talk it
What
out,
are you talking about? It's everything. Don't
it's
you
every
understand?
it's all these 10, 50 things. But what it is the one or two core things, and then everything else is just piling on top of it and making it worse. And as I've talked to a friend, and they will start talking about perhaps stories that's happened at work. I'm just using work because that was one particular scenario. And they were talking about at work, a situation happened where they weren't consulted and decisions were made, and it had to do with them and their role there. And because of that, it took the power away from them. They didn't feel like they weren't appreciated. And that's what it came down to,
Yeah.
that appreciation.
Yeah.
And that's what I would recommend when you're talking to someone. Just try and sort out from what they're saying, what are the core problems, because the core ones will repeat. And they'll keep talking about it
Yeah.
over and over again.
The one thing that's interesting to me is in all of your advice, you haven't said the words mental illness. And I think that's a great thing because I think if you come out to somebody and say, I think you're mentally ill,
I think you're mental.
yeah, you're basically saying, man, I think you're nuts. You should get some help, which is the worst possible way to go about it. But you might be in a situation where that's an entirely appropriate thing to do.
Well,
I mean, I know surfers that
it's
have.
not me, but
I know, and that's the thing. Every situation is different. Every relationship is different, and it's about, like you said, picking your moments.
mm,
For me, it's about, like I said, I call that my risk assessment. In my head, where is this conversation going? What is this person asking me for? Because whenever you meet up with a friend that's struggling, they are asking you for something. And it might just be time, it might just be a compassionate voice, it might just be your smile, is what they're asking for. At what point would you start to suggest to somebody that they might need to seek help? And how would you go about that part of a conversation? Because that for me is the crux, is understanding that yes, you can talk to your friends, you can try and help them sort out the issue, figure out what's most bothering them, but you cannot fix anything in their life. As you said with this person with the job, I know that you didn't try and fix it. You tried to empower them to fix it. How do we address that mental health side of it? How do we address that side that, mate, while this circumstance is bad and I get it, it sounds horrible, it is horrible, perhaps you need to go seek some help.
I think when you're talking to someone, you need to understand how often they're feeling the way that they're feeling.
Mhm.
It helps to differentiate between what could potentially be a mental health issue to just having a bad time. Because we all know day in, day out, we can feel a bit down, but how long do you feel down for? How long do you feel sad or overwhelmed or anxious? Is it every day? Is it only once a week and only in certain circumstances? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, Generally, because I'm not a professional, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I've just learnt a lot of things. And when I'm talking to a friend, I always just give them a little action list for them to do. And we can talk about that on another one. And we have talked about them in other chats as well,
Yeah.
Merey's little carer tips. And they start doing that because it helps them to get that empowerment like you
Yeah.
were talking. And then I would, after that, just say to them, look, why don't you go and see your GP?
Yeah.
Just have a chat. If they trust their GP, then just have that chat.
In all of this, how do you stop from taking responsibility for, because you talk about questions that you ask, and it's in very specific situations. It's very, very particular, friends. This is not necessarily how you would have the conversation with anyone. So I don't know what my question was.
I don't know.
It was
I
really
mean,
good too.
I've helped people at work as well. I just to share with everyone, I seem to be a magnet for people with mental health issues, and at work, if anyone's going to have a mental health issue, it's going to be someone in my team.
Maybe you're the problem.
It could be. I'm causing everyone to have mental health issues, but it's true. I always have people around me, not just at home, who suffer at varying degrees. And
But what's interesting about that, and I want you to finish that thought. I once did a first aid course with this instructor that works for St. John's Ambulance in Australia, and he just has story after story after story after story of him having to save people's lives, having to help them, having to use first aid outside of his job with St. John's Ambulance. And to me, it was weird. I was like, nobody has this much thing. But when you said you seem to attract people with mental illness, I think it's more because you're aware of the situation, because of like the St. John's Ambulance man, because he knew what to look for when somebody was physically needing first aid. He was always able to respond in kind. So for you, I think it's just you are more perceptive in understanding that you're not facing a person in their potentially rational mind. You're seeing a person that is potentially struggling with some kind of mental illness. So I'll come back to the question that I asked. How do you stop getting to that point where you take responsibility, where you feel responsible for the person, where you start to uh, empathize with them so much that you start taking on their issues? How do you maintain a, a relationship as just a friend and not a carer?
it's a really good question. I just don't dive into it that deeply with someone. I think it would be really different if it was your child.
Oh, well,
Absolutely,
obviously. I mean,
and that's
that's,
a
yeah,
separate
that's
that's a
a whole
separate thing
different.
altogether. We're talking more about adults, but in that, it's that thought that they are an adult. They're an adult and they need to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
You can be their support and talk to them, which I do, and I always offer that support to meet up, have a chat,
Yeah.
vent, do all those sorts of things, but I don't bring it back home.
And you
It's
don't wear what they're feeling. You
well,
don't take it
I
on.
can't wear what they're feeling. I don't really know what that is. Um,
Yeah, but
I'm not them.
you've said it when caring for me, and let's talk about spouses in just a second, but you had to learn to not go where I am with my mental illness symptoms.
Mm,
So if I'm seemingly cranky, you've had to learn to distance yourself from that emotion and not take it on.
mm,
And I think that's my concern here, because you are an undeniable expert in helping people with mental illness, just instinctually, your knowledge base, your caring personality, your loving nature. Um, you do so much just on an instinctive basis that a psychologist or psychiatrist is always amazed about and have been. My psychologists have always talked about your uh, ability to perceive things. We all don't have that. I don't have it. I have it to a certain extent, but I don't have your natural gift for that. It's something that I have to work at a lot more. So it's marriage and mental illness. So let's talk about what you would do if it was your spouse. How would you go about that conversation? And ours was very different because I came home one day a different person. My behaviors were obviously a million miles different from normal. There was no hiding the fact that I had a mental illness. What should a person do if their spouse, the person that they love most in the world, is struggling and potentially can't see it?
Mm.
What would your instinct be?
Again, pick your moment where you feel that they can be the most receptive to what you have to ask them. And you could potentially, it depends where they are. If they are feeling vulnerable outside of the house, then you're going to have the conversation at home. Otherwise, change the perspective. But most importantly, don't make it so that someone feels threatened. Um, but try and create you know them. You know how normally you can talk to them, and you've just got to start the conversations, and you've got to start asking them, where are you at? Because this is what I'm seeing.
Yeah. What if the person persists and just saying, "There's nothing wrong, leave me alone"?
Very difficult if people do that, but um, again, you could try that method of, uh, like you said, that lady called around and got them into their GP,
Yep.
and just say to them, "I just want you to come and see the GP. Um, it's for me. I want you to see them for me because I just feel that you're not doing so well." You could try and make it sound more like a health condition for them to go. Um, it is a hard one because we've talked about this before.
Yeah. It gets me because we know of relationships that of friends of ours that have failed. The I think most of our friends seem to be divorced now. Um, it, it, it's easier to give up. It's easier to walk away. But whenever I talk to somebody about the fact that they're staying in a situation, somebody that's worried about their partner, is to first and foremost that they keep safe. So
Mm,
the distinction between domestic violence and mental illness can be very small. A person can appear angry and upset, and it can look like it's verging on domestic violence, but it's not. I mean, we've seen that with our daughters, how they respond to us at times seems unusually um, adversarial.
mm,
They're very, very angry that we're talking about it. Now, they're not abusing us, they're just caught in their own emotions. But it must be said that you have to keep yourself safe. And if you feel like you are the victim of any kind of domestic violence, you need to be safe. It is not normal. You should not expect to live in a situation where abuse is normal. It is not. It is abnormal and it's not on. It's not good and it's not your fault. And leaving in that case is your best option. That being said, you're living with a man, woman, person. You've loved them. You know them well. They're struggling with their mental illness. You can see it, they can't. I think there's got to be a point at which you're willing to pull the plug. And we've said that
mm.
in our relationship. It got to a point where, in a situation that was horrible for everybody, you essentially said, "This is not going to work if you keep doing this."
Yes, it did get to that point.
And things have got to change. If
That
things,
was many years down the track, but yes.
yeah. And that was a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
No, absolutely. But I think you have to keep trying the conversation and identifying to them with examples of how they're different, why things aren't working, and what they're doing that isn't normal behavior for them,
Yeah.
and why it's hard.
Yeah. We know one situation with a couple that are married and were desperate to stay together. But there were so many things unsaid that it led to tension. Now, we've got a guest who'd like to jump in. We're going to try and accept Kendra. Let's see how we go. They're coming in. Kendra, g'day, mate. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
No, doing well. Thanks, mate. You had something you wanted to share today?
I just wonder, like, I'm 41 years old, and I've dealt with mental illness my whole life, and I've had really bad relationships because of it. I don't know the stem of all of it, right? I don't know where it all started, but I do know that I'm dealing with it, and I'm just like I wonder if like it's ever gonna be like that, married, or am I gonna be alone for my rest of my life? Is one of my worries. It's not necessarily a worry. I try to go by the day and go with the moments, right? But now I've become injured too, and so I'm kind of like in my house all the time, and I have no ways to meet people or be out, and I don't want to do it on the internet and old fashioned. And I just but my mental illness has been getting a little bit worse than better right now, and I know that's not the time to start any type of relationship either, you know. So this is the most I've done. I'm a little nervous coming on here, but
Well, Kendra, darling, the first thing I just want to tell
that's
you
about where
is,
I'm at.
well, I just want to tell you how brave I think you are, and how amazing I think you are to even have this
Thank you.
conversation with me. It takes a brave person to admit that they have these issues in their life and that they're trying to make them better. And I think that is incredibly awesome. So please take that on board and consider that a win, that every
Yeah.
day you're getting up and you're trying and you're making that effort to try every day. Okay. I know you probably are thinking in your brains now are telling you,
I might get a little every day. Like,
keep going, Kendra.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just saying that it is a little bit each day because like I get one thing done and then I gotta do something else, and it's like I can't keep up even on the housework, let alone trying to make a relationship, right? And then everybody that I try to meet, they're not people that I should be around. They're just people that are trying to take from me, or you know, they're not. They do take from me, leave me with nothing, and then I'm screwed for the month. Like I don't know how people are like that, and it's just terrible. But and through those situations so many times, and it makes me close down. It makes me close down, and it makes me just I have to spend more time with myself, and I love myself, and I know that. So it's hard for me not be able to share that with anybody, right? And I had animals for a very long time, and they all gone away, and I lost you guys. I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, mate,
absolutely.
we got you.
Oh, okay. It's working. I have no idea how to work these. Yeah, so it's just one of those things where I'm just confused. I don't have friends and that I can trust. I don't have there you go. I don't have people that have a brain to talk to half the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying bad things about them. I can't
I can I can understand, Kendra. From a man's perspective, what I find attractive in a person is a person that knows themselves and a person that understands themselves, because we're all broken. We're all damaged in some way.
Yeah.
It's that genuineness that I look for. When Merey and I first met each other, it was her genuineness that attracted me to her. It didn't hurt that she was beautiful, but she was just genuine. She was herself, and The only question that I have, Kendra, just to start with, is just are you getting any help? Are you able to speak to anybody about just the issues for yourself? Have you got a doctor? Have you
It's
got
happening
somebody?
slowly.
Good.
Um, yeah, that's where I came from today. And it's just taking, like, it seems like 10 steps back, one forward, right?
Yeah.
And she's just a nurse practitioner, but I also see, I was planning on going back to my sexual assault counseling. Because
Yep.
that's something I've been like
Yep.
running from for a long time, and I need to get that under my loop because she's a wonderful counselor, and a few things happened where I kind of ditched away from everything during COVID, and nothing
Yeah.
ever got back to normal. So it was
Yeah.
on my list today of things to do, is get back in touch with her.
Great.
So that's definitely where the help comes in with that. It's a start because that's where I think a lot of it started was when I was young too, right? So
Yeah.
we were molested me and my cousin were molested when we were kids, and my
Well,
mom and my uncle that have the family still, well, they don't believe me, and I don't know what they've told each other. And my uncle has now lost his daughter. She passed away, and she was my only cousin growing up.
yeah.
She passed away on my birthday, about 15 years ago now. And like it was my mom wanted to tell my uncle, and I said, "Are you kidding me? His daughter just died. Like, don't tell him that." Like, and then he's coming from me, right? Like,
Yeah.
none of us get along anymore ever since my grandma passed away. So it was just a small group of us, but we had each other, and that was what we had. So my mom's the only one left in that group besides him, and she's just giving me a really hard time, like really hard time. And she doesn't understand everything I'm doing to help myself, but
Yeah.
she won't see me unless I've done my treatment and all this stuff. And then my treatment got screwed up because of miscommunication and
Yeah.
just everything wrong. Like,
Yeah.
and but she doesn't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear the facts or they aren't really excuses, they're facts, but they become excuses, right? So
The thing I keep
to me, they're
hearing,
not because I know that.
the thing that I keep
Yeah,
hearing, Kendra, and I am sorry to cut you off. The thing that I keep hearing is how much
no, that's
empathy.
okay.
No, it's how much empathy you have. I'm looking at a woman that is
Yeah,
empathetic. She is aware that yeah, she has some struggles, so you're genuine and you are aware that you need some help. And the thing
hmm,
is, when you're at that point, and I've been there, where you feel hopeless, helpless, and alone, the thought that anything good could come out of your situation just seems impossible. But you have the key components that will, in time, lead you to have the life that you deserve. Now, first off, I
work out.
believe what you've said.
Absolutely, I believe that.
No, but I believe you. When you talk about the abuse,
Yeah,
I believe you. I can hear it in your voice. What, no matter what other people say,
thank you,
we believe you. I am really excited for you, Kendra, because it's impossible for you to see at
thank
the
you.
moment, but the positives that you have far outweigh the negatives at the moment. And yes, that you may not enter into a relationship soon, but you've got the wisdom to understand that now's not the best time to
Yeah,
start a
Exactly.
relationship. But the more that you delve into
mm,
your self-care, the more that you take care of yourself,
yeah,
these good things will come to you because you're a good person. I I
right.
know that things are
Yeah,
going to be good for
and
you.
I do right every time I can. Yeah, the only person I harm is myself, and it doesn't harm nobody else, right? And there's no things that I have to straighten out in my life, but I do so much for others. It's unbelievable, and it tires me out. And I attract energy from people big time, and that's another thing that wears me out. But it's almost sometimes when it happens, I almost feel better that I'm worn out from that, and I'm not worn out from something else.
Sometimes you can get burnt out doing things that you love. Um, I spent time with a friend yesterday and it was delightful. It was wonderful. I hadn't seen him in years, but I was completely exhausted afterwards. But it was an exhaustion in a good way.
Yeah.
Now, Kendra, mate, I'm sorry. The app is about to cut you off. I really want to thank you for reaching out to us today.
Okay.
Kendra, keep up with your self-care. Keep up with keeping a list of things to do each day, and try and get small wins and get back to see your counsellor. You're doing all good things. Good things.
I will, and I can come back on here for you guys, right? Like,
yeah,
I can
absolutely.
come back and talk to you guys.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
You're beautiful. Thank you. That was awesome.
That was awesome.
What a beautiful person Kendra is.
I don't know where to go from this.
Oh, look, I just appreciate that there's people out there who are reaching out. That's a marvelous example of someone who is struggling but is actively working every day, and it's hard work. I don't want to lessen that at all. It is hard work, and it's a hard slog, and it can take a long time to get to where you want to be. But all we can say is if you put the hard work in, which we've done together for a very long time.
Yep.
We're talking about over 15 years of hard work. You will get there. It's not easy, but you will get there. And that's also been the same for co-workers that I've worked with and with my friends. They've gotten there eventually just through understanding themselves, putting in self-care, because it's good to care for others, and it always is, and you should still do that. But it's also good to be a little bit selfish and to look after you and to put things in place that helps you to succeed in where you want to get to with your goals and with your mental health as well. And you did that for yourself, didn't you?
I hope so.
Oh, yes, you did. Yes, he did. He did do that. And and that's why Mark is now in a place where he can get onto a podcast and speak to you. Once upon a time, he would never have been able to do that.
No.
So that's just more of an encouragement to people out there if you're really in a bad place. And don't worry if you can't get out. There's other ways that you can have moments and be mindful and practice mindfulness within your own house. But we can get into that on another episode.
If you are wondering, marriage and mental illness, we've got about, probably 11 or 12. You can go to STP, Shattered the Podcast. We're on iTunes. We're on the YouTubes. We're all over the place, all over the internet. You can listen to the audio versions. You can watch the videos on YouTube. We do this time every week. So you can expect us back on a Wednesday, our time, because we are in Australia. So it can be a little bit difficult with the time zones, but you can actually come to the conversation through the Wisdom app. You can click on our profile and go through and see all the recordings that we've done. But the podcast is there. We encourage you to reach out to us through Instagram or Facebook. We would love to hear from you. One time, I've got 2 questions so far that listeners have sent through that we're going to do once we get enough questions. I'm just going to sit here and pummel you with questions for a day.
Oh, no worries.
For a conversation. So to Kendra and Rebecca, if you're still listening, even if you're not, we think the world of you. We are stunned by your courage in speaking out today. You are courageous. And next week, I really want to talk about hope, because I struggle with hope, finding hope. What is hope? What does hope look like? Is it a destination? Is it something that can be achieved? Is hope in the eye of the beholder? Is hope for somebody, not hope for somebody else? It's an interesting question. I look forward to discussing that with you.
Also wanted to mention for parents who might be listening, we will do an episode on caring for children with mental health issues, because that is a struggle and it's very, very hard. And we do want to cover that off for listeners who particularly have teenagers and children with mental health issues.
Yeah. Our only hesitation with that is we need to be able to have that conversation in a safe way. And there are parts of the mental health journey that our kids have gone through that both of us can't speak about yet. So that would have to be a little bit more of a structured conversation. So I want to thank everybody that's listened to Marriage and Mental Illness today. You can find us through STP Shattered the podcast. I've been Mark. This has been my beautiful wife, Merey. And as always, mate, thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Shattered the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.
Thanks, everyone. Subscribe, like, and share.